I got put in the truck. As we prepare to remember this weekend, our Memorial Day weekend, for those who have gone before us, let us start this day with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 82nd day of the 106th Legislature First Session. Our chaplain for today is the Reverend Stephen Peeler from the Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd, Hastings, Nebraska, Senator Halloran's district. Please rise.
Let us pray. Lord of all, we lift before you all who govern the state of Nebraska. May those who hold power understand that it is a trust from you to be used, not for personal glory or profit, but for the service of the people. Drive from us cynicism, selfishness, and corruption. Grant in your mercy just and honest government, and give us grace to live together in unity and peace. You call your people to honor those in authority, participate in wise decisions for our common life, and serve our neighbors in communities near and far. Bless the leaders of our land, that we may be at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of the earth. Bless the public servants and the government of this state, that they may do their work in a spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice. Help them to use their authority to serve faithfully and to promote our common life. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Peeler. I call to order the 82nd day of the 106th Legislature First Session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections.
Thank you, sir. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
Mr. President, a reference report referring study resolutions to the appropriate standing committee. Bills read on final reading yesterday afternoon and early evening were presented to the governor at 5:15. I have an amendment to be printed to LR 257. And, Mr. President, the lobby report is required by state law, as well as acknowledgement of receipt of agency reports available to membership on the legislative website. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Albright, for what purpose you rise?
For a point of personal privilege,
Please
please.
proceed.
Well, thank you, President Foley, and good morning, colleagues. I am honored today to visit a resolution that we have, Legislative Resolution 150. Whereas May 24th, 2019 is National Poppy Day, and whereas the National Poppy Day is celebrated in memory of all veterans who have given their lives the ultimate sacrifice, and whereas red crepe paper poppies have been made, worn, and displayed and distributed for fundraising efforts by veteran groups such as the American Legion Family and the American Legion Auxiliary for decades to observe both Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And whereas each year veteran poppy makers across Nebraska, including Dennis Ott of Wayne, make thousands of memorial poppies each year to fundraise and remember. And whereas the National Poppy Day serves as a strong renewal of our nation's commitment to a powerful reminder of the cost of our freedom. Now therefore be it resolved by the members of the 106th Legislature of Nebraska, first session, 1, that the legislature remembers the lives lost in World War I and appreciates the work of the veteran poppy makers that help us celebrate Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and National Poppy Day. That copies, number 2, that copies of this resolution be sent to the American Legion Auxiliary for Nebraska and to Dennis Ott. And on your desks today, I've provided each one of you a poppy. And I'd just like to quickly let you know what the background of this. For more than 90 years, the American Legion Auxiliary has distributed the memorial poppy to remind Americans that millions sacrificed their lives and health to keep our nation free. During World War II, the poppy flourished on the battlefields of the Flanders Fields, among the shelled buildings and bombed, scared landscape. Like the blood that was shed there, its brilliant red bloom became a sign of hope and renewal. For those who never left and those who have given their lives, it is a perpetual memorial to their bravery. The American Legion Auxiliary poppy is handmade by veterans who receive a small stipend for each poppy made. Memorial poppy contributions are devoted entirely to the rehabilitation and assistance for veterans and their families. On behalf of those veterans, thank you for caring. And today, Beverly Neal, I want to recognize her. She's my AA, and she is serving as the Nebraska State President for the American Legion Auxiliary. Very proud of her, and if you don't mind, you can certainly introduce those that are here today under the balcony.
Thanks, Senator Albright. As she mentioned, she has some guests today. We have members of the American Legion Auxiliary for Nebraska with us under the north balcony. Could we ask those citizens to please rise so we could welcome you all to the Nebraska Legislature? Senator Merman, for what purpose you rise?
Point of personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, Nebraska. And thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Today I want to apologize for any hurt feelings that could have happened yesterday. Our intention was not to hurt Senator Kavanaugh's feelings. I did apologize to her after the session yesterday. We have a good relationship, and I don't want to speak for her, but I know that we will continue to have a good relationship. We do often disagree on matters of policy. We did not agree on LB 533. We did not agree that that bill should have been on the consent calendar. So we acted according to the rules and had it removed. My intention was not to blindside or hurt anyone or to be inconsiderate of Senator Kavanaugh or especially of her late uncle. So again, I do want to apologize for any hurt feelings that could have happened yesterday, that did happen yesterday. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Senator
Lieutenant
Murray.
Governor.
Thanks, Senator Murray. Members, I understand some donuts are being distributed or will be distributed. I'm not sure which. They are in celebration. Senator Linehan is celebrating the birth of her 6th grandchild, a boy, this morning at 3:30 a.m. Marcus Kevin Syme weighed 8 pounds, 5 ounces, 20.5 inches. We'll proceed to the agenda, which is a final reading item. Members can please be at their desk pursuant to the rules. Senator Friesen, for what purpose do you rise?
Personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. What happened here last night, I think everyone has come to terms with, and hopefully we can move forward today. What I kind of want to talk about is the whole process of consent calendar. And this is where me and Senator Chambers probably agree on, is that consent calendar is kind of a special place for things. And over the years, I've watched these games been played that I've been here, and it's just been 5 years. But it is a potential path where you don't have to go 3 hours, 15 minutes, and you're guaranteed to vote up or down. We would love to have this privilege on a lot of things. And so it is a special place for a lot of bills, and we can get things done that people want to get done. So I wish we wouldn't play games with it. When we're opposed to something, file it as soon as you see it, get it over with. There's no special pass for anything here from anybody. But we need to be respectful of when we do things and when we see them and how we do them. So with that said, I think the consent calendar probably serves a purpose. It's not something that I really like having there, because everything to me is important when we pass legislation in this state. Everything should pass on the same parameters that we're using for other bills. But again, it's there, we'll deal with it, and hopefully we can finish out the session dealing with some big issues we still have to talk about. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. We're on final reading. Legislative Bill 533. Mr. Clerk.
Congressional Bill 533, introduced Kavanaugh, Hanson, and Hunt, a bill for necessitating marriage, amend sections 42, 103, 106, 109, and 110, reissue as statute changes to Section 1. Marriage when either party is living spouses upon marriage terms of child and grandparent for child brother, sister to parent, subdivision, extended children, relatives born in wedlock to those born in wedlock. An application made for license county clerk here shall be granted such license. Service license service marriage shall be provided with health and human services. The actual cost determined by the Department of Forms application license shall be referred to the parties using that designation. In the possession of marriage, no particular bill shall be accepted or seven witnesses that take such marriage, there shall be at least 2 witnesses specified the minister or magistrate present at the ceremony. Whenever marriage has been solemnized, President 4101 and 117, with regards to service of the minister of specified marriage, place the parties of granted 2 witnesses who were present at the marriage and the time and place thereof. Section 5, written in sections 42, 103, 106, 109, 110, reissue by statute Nebraska repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 533 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. all voted carried. Record, please.
Voting aye. Senators Blood, Bowles, Brandt, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Matt Hanson, Hildreth, Hickman, Howard, Hunt, Kolowski, Colterman, LaGrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McDonald, Morfeld, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Salama, Stenner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Senators Albright, Boston, Clements, Erdman, Holloran, Lowe, Moser, Merman. Not voting, Senators Hart, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Groney, Ben Hanson, Hughes, McAllister, Brewer, and Breesy. Senator McAllister voting yes. Senator Geist voting yes. 33 ayes, 8 nays, 6 present not voting, 2 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 533 passes. We'll proceed to select file 2019 committee priority bill. LB 436.
36, Senator, I have A&R amendments.
Senator Salama.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 436 be adopted.
The motion is to adopt the United amendments. Debatable motion, Senator Chambers.
Mr. President, I don't often rise on a point of personal privilege to discuss things that are before us, but I have some things on my mind, and I'm going to say them this morning. This motion to adopt the ENR amendments will allow me to speak 3 times. I will vote to adopt those amendments. The motion to then move the bill gives me an opportunity to speak 3 more times should I need it. And I'm making clear what it is that I'm doing this morning. I'm not in a good mood. There are 3 things for sure that I'm going to read about. They all involve women. 1, a sneaky attack by some cowardly white men on a Muslim lady. And I'm going to read it. Now, I say enough things that anger these white men. I get the cowardly calls about what I say on the flag, and they cursed out Cindy because she answers the phone. I go to stores in Lincoln. I go to get in my car. Why don't they attack me? Now, if I don't carry guns and I don't carry knives, I better be able to do something to protect and defend myself, being 82 years old. Don't you agree? Because I'm not going to stand still and take a whipping from anybody. And if a gang of them would come, they might get a banquet. But the first one that gets to me is going to let me at least get a sandwich out of it. These cowardly things that involve violence are a throwback to the cowardly white men who put the lynch mobs together because they were too cowardly to be one-on-one. And when they come against somebody, they always do it with a mob. Generally, they will be in disguise. This comes from this morning's World Herald, and I heard about it on the news, and that's where they identified or described the attackers as white males. Authorities are investigating an attack against a Muslim woman Wednesday night in Lincoln as a hate crime. An 18-year-old woman told police she was on a neighborhood street near West A and Southwest 16th Streets before 8:25 p.m. when 2 men approached her and made, quote, threatening and derogatory statements, unquote, Lincoln police said. The woman said she was knocked to the ground and kicked. These brave white men knocked her down and kicked her. And you wonder why I say the things I say on this floor about that rag. Is there liberty and justice for her? Is there protection for her? Shouldn't she be able to walk the streets of Lincoln in safety if this is a country with liberty and justice for all? Or is being a Muslim and being a woman such that she is excused or kicked out of the human race? And that statement about justice and liberty for all, the word all would not include her. Continuing. Officials declined to release more details on the nature of the threats. because it would, quote, compromise the integrity of the investigation and cause the destruction of valuable evidence, unquote, they said in a press release. Police have been unable to identify the men and are asking for the public's help. One man was riding a bicycle and the other was on a skateboard, and they last were seen near Southwest 17th and West Rose Streets. Both men are white. Anyone with information should call 402-441-6000, or for anonymity, call Crime Stoppers at 402-475-3600. Quote, we are analyzing video, canvassing the area, and will be examining digital evidence, unquote, Lincoln Police Chief Jeff Blymeister said. Quote, our community and our agency will not tolerate hate crimes, unquote. The incident has caught the attention of a national Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, which is offering a reward for information.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Before proceeding, we have some guests to announce today. Senator Hunt announces that Charlotte Guthrie, a senior at Lincoln High School who is shadowing the senator today, is with us on the south balcony. Ms. Guthrie, if you could please rise, I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. And Senator Chambers has a guest today. We have with us Dr. Natalie Lynch of Omaha, Nebraska, who's serving as today's family physician of the day. Dr. Lynch is with us under the north balcony. Doctor, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Continuing the article, the incident has caught the attention of a national Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, which is offering a reward for information. The Council on American Islamic Relations is offering a $1,000 reward for tips that lead to the arrest and conviction of the two assailants. Ibrahim Hooper, the group's national communications director, said the organization has reported more than 500 examples of anti-Muslim bias or harassment this year nationwide. Quote, we hope the offer of a reward will lead to the arrest and conviction of the alleged perpetrators, unquote. He said, quote, incidents in which a biased motive is suspected must be treated with the seriousness they deserve, and the alleged perpetrators must be brought to justice, unquote. Members of the legislature, these types of white men are detrimental to the cause of white supremacy. But they take that racism in with their mother's milk. Whether they go to church, and if they go to church, they'll run into it. Certainly in this legislature. But there are not many black people who, on a singular basis as I, will say what's on their mind because they have family members. They have jobs. And there are other things that inhibit them. But I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what anybody says. And nobody is going to intimidate me into being quiet or to make me run and hide. When that guy who died recently in Iowa, that bigot who was on the Lincoln radio station and he killed himself, he's the one who misstated and took out of context a comment I made about the police. And once again, all of the cowardly white people called and cursed. The cowards stood up on this floor and made their cowardly attacks. Some even brought up things that I had said in the past that upset them, and I stood when time came. I stayed here. I didn't run and leave. I couldn't wait for my opportunity to speak, and I laughed at them. And I let them know they were crazy if they thought I was going to apologize for what I said or take it back when I meant every word of it. What I said, not what that dead man, the now dead racist, had misrepresented in terms of what I said. But for those on the floor who talked about things in the past I said on the floor that upset them, I asked, why didn't they say something then? They had a mouth then, just like they have one now, while they're part of the mob. But that's the way they operate. And they think I'm a coward like they are. And because there are a lot of angry faces, ugly, angry, white faces, I'm going to be quiet or not do what I need to do or say what I ought to say. As long as I have breath in my body. And as somebody said, a half a penny of lead can take anybody out of this world. From the most humble individual to the most powerful person in office. I'm aware of these things, but I'm also aware that there is so much cowardice in this society that white men flee when nobody pursues, and white men gang up, as was done yesterday, against one of my female colleagues, and I happen not to be here. Now, you know what? I told you that I couldn't push a piece of paper through this piece of wood. Now, this wood, I think, goes in different directions. What would you think if I took this 82-year-old fragile hand? Fragile. How fragile is a bone, 82 years old? And somehow, I managed to position this, and I brought my hand down just right in accord with the laws of physics and separated that piece of wood into two parts. What would you think then? I'm destroying state property, huh? And carrying on in a way that's inappropriate for somebody on the floor of the legislature. But how many white people would call and say anything in opposition to what was done last night
It's time, Senator.
to my colleague?
Senator Chambers, you're recognized for third opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, when I speak in behalf of these women, it's not that I think they can't protect themselves, that they can't speak up for themselves, but I'm not one of those who stand on the sideline and watch something that is wrongfully done, and especially when it reflects on the integrity of an organization of which I voluntarily am a part. I will separate myself from it. I will not sit in silence and watch it or become aware of it and not do something about it. Whatever little I can do. And I can always raise my voice. Another thing I'm upset about is what your racist, insane president, and he is insane. Not only are you Americans watching him unravel mentally, but the whole world is watching this man sink into insanity publicly. He lies. He is an inveterate liar and cannot help it and is unconscious of when he lies. And he has surrounded himself with sycophants. And when he asked them, what did I say? Well, he's told them what to say, that they were to say, and they look sheepish when on television they have to tell the lies that he told and which everybody knows is a lie and which he may retract later on. He's been known to say something in the morning, forget it, and say the opposite in the evening. So when it's appropriate and he's at one of these Ku Klux Klan rallies, you know, the maggot gatherings, don't they call it maggot? Make America Great Again. The maggots come together. Maggots thrive on decaying flesh and nastiness. And that's Trump. Trump will say, you know what? When I went in that meeting with crazy Nancy, oh, and she's crazy. I watch her. She's getting worse and worse. She thought that because she can intimidate those Democrats, she could intimidate me. But by God, when I walked into that meeting, here was a table. I hit that table, and I gave her what for. I let her know that I'm the president, and I have no fear of Nancy Pelosi as those in, and then somebody say, Donald. Nothing gets a duck in trouble but his bill. That's their way of telling him that you're lying. You're contradicting something you said before. And all these white people, especially those that represent you in Congress, go along with everything he says, everything he does. And then when Congress gets a little backbone and will pass a provision to protect our LGBTQ brothers and sisters from discrimination. None of the racists from Nebraska supported it because they know what you all are. I know what you are. You show it all the time, and somebody needs to tell you to your face. And you have as much opportunity to speak on this floor as I do. If you don't like what I say, stand up and say it while I'm here, and I can respond too in any way you want. There used to be some lumbering lummoxes down here, and they would make comments that I took as a veiled threat. I don't believe in starting anything, but if somebody starts something with me, they better be prepared to finish it. So I pointed out that we're talking on this floor, but based on some things that were said, you got something on your mind. So we'll settle what we can here, and we'll settle the rest of it wherever you want to settle it and however you want to try to settle it.
1 minute.
And he didn't want to do anything else because he was used to bullying and intimidating these cowardly white people on the floor of this legislature. Well, you need to know that somebody's in your midst now who is different from maybe all those you've ever contacted, maybe different from any that you will contact in the future. But there was a poem that Kipling wrote, and I won't tell the whole thing. But the son of a colonel whose horse had been stolen by what was called a border thief, they came together and had a confrontation, and a young kid wound up saying, "Take up the mare for my father's gift. By God, she has carried a man." Y'all see a man this morning. You all see a man this morning. Not a faux, F-A-U-X, pretender.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I want to rise and recognize the same thing Senator Chambers was talking about, which was a horrible hate crime last night in Lincoln against a Muslim woman. And I'll yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Thanks, Senator Hunt. Senator Chambers, 4 minutes, 45.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. And I will tip you all off to what I'm doing. I'm going to get it all out this morning. Then the process can go on its merry way. But I'm going to get it out. Here's something, because I was talking about your racist president. The new $20 bill that's to come out was slated to have the face of Harriet Tubman, a black woman. And for all I know, she could have been in my ancestry. I mean, by blood, for all I know. But I don't investigate things like that because I don't want my situation to be like that of a turnip, where the best part of it is underground, which means I'm not going to dredge up people who may have done great things and they're now dead and try to ride on their coattails and have some of the glory that's reflected from them fall on me because by an accident of birth, I happen to be in the same bloodline they're in. I'm not interested in that. What I am, I'm going to be based on what I do and what I say and when I do it and when I say it and in the presence of whom I do it and will say it. See, you all are small potatoes for me. I had a confrontation with the President of the United States when Jimmy Carter was the president, and we were in the East Room, and guess who ran out of the room? He didn't actually run. He moved rapidly out of the room, the president. I asked him 3 questions. No, a lot of Nebraskans were there. And when he gave his response, oh, they cheered. But then he scooted on out of the room. It was his White House, not mine. And by the way, it's white because the British in the War of 1812 set that sucker on fire. And they used heavy coats of white paint to cover up what it looked like. That's why it's called the White House. And until President Obama was there, it was the White House because only white individuals had been there. So what did your crazy president do? First of all, he revealed his ignorance of history. Not only did Harriet Tubman operate what has come to be known as the Underground Railroad, where she helped slaves escape from Southern America all the way to Canada. And this might just be an anecdote, but there was one man who was going to ride the Underground Railroad to freedom, and when time came, he got cold feet because he knew if it wasn't successful, the torture these white people would put him through if they caught him. Oh, what they would do, they'd prop your leg up, and then they'd break it like you break a piece of wood and give you no medication. They would beat your back raw, then pour salt water brine in the injuries. And they might castrate you just for good measure. So this individual said, Harriet, I can't go on. She said, why not? He said, I'm afraid. Now, Harriet Tubman knew what she was dealing with, both the people she was trying to help and the races she'd come against. So she was like, she had concealed carry. She pulled a long pistol out and she put it on his nose. She said, you're going to be free or you're going to be dead. Now make up your mind. He said, Harriet, I think I'm going to be free. And he got back on the train and rode it to freedom. Not a literal train, metaphorically, but it was called the Underground Railroad. I'll stop at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator DeBoer.
Good morning, colleagues. I don't address you very often, as you all know, but I wanted to clarify something because I know that before I came here, I used to watch on television quite a lot the legislature for a very long time. And I know that there were times when things happened and I didn't understand what happened. So for those of you who may have been watching yesterday, maybe watching this morning, and you're wondering, why are people getting so upset because someone just didn't tell someone something? That seems like, oh, everybody's blowing things up over nothing. Let me explain what happened from my perspective, and I understand that other people may disagree. Yesterday, we were on consent calendar final reading. That means that we had consent calendar general file, then we'd had consent calendar select file, and then finally, you wait a couple days and we have final reading. Now, we have a list of what's coming up, and we can follow that list. There's another one. It's not difficult to see what's coming up ahead for us. When yesterday, at just a minute or two before we were actually to discuss a bill, some folks then wanted to pull it from consent calendar. This may not have been what was happening, but let me tell you how it felt and looked to me. It looked like someone purposefully waited from May 13th when they wrote the letter until that moment to put it in. Is that legal? It's legal. But there's a difference between legal and what's right. And the reason that this is objectionable is because if you have two opportunities already and you don't do anything, and then at the very last minute, literally minutes before you do something, it looks like gamesmanship. It looks like trying to play a game. And colleagues, I know every single one of us in this room could be doing something else with our life right now. A lot of us have given up careers. A lot of us have given up other things. We're not home planting. It's a little late for planting now, but we're not doing our farm work that we should be doing. This is not a game. It is not a game to me at all. People's lives are at stake. I go home and I think about those lives and the lives that we affect. I don't want to play a game. I don't want to put an amendment on somebody's bill just to play a game with them. We've been doing that some, and it's those poor. I also feel empathy for the four men that were called out yesterday because I know they're not the only ones. But we cannot play games. This is not a game. What we are doing, we are 49 people who are doing one of the most serious things that people can do. We affect people's lives. It cannot be about gotcha. It's not about gotcha. It's about people's lives. Everything we do here affects someone in a grave way. And I know, and I have the responsibility for, and I take home that when I vote for or against, sometimes I do things which I know are negatively affecting people's lives because I've had to weigh things in the balance, and that hits me. So if you're watching at home, I just want you to know that the reason people reacted is because we care about this institution. We don't see this as a game. We care about the people of Nebraska. We take our job seriously. And when something looks like that, and maybe it wasn't, but when something looks like that, it upsets me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator DeBoer. Members, the motion before you is to adopt the ENR amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ENR amendments are adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Chambers will move to bracket the bill.
Senator Chambers, recognized to open your bracket motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm doing it this way so that nobody has to be involved in what I'm saying by yielding me time. I will find a way to make time for what I'm going to say. And if I decide we have to stay here all morning on this, that's what we're going to do. And you can leave anytime you want to, by the way. It makes me no difference. My philosophy is that louder the vipers hiss, the closer and more effectively I'm striking to their nest. I was talking about Harriet Tubman. Not only did she take black people to freedom, but she did some work for the Union Army. While white men were craven and cowardly, she was risking her life for a country that enslaved her. And at the time she was doing it, people like her could continue to be brought to this country from Africa, enslaved, and sex trafficked. Sex trafficked. And I'm going to use some time on that sex trafficking bill too, to tell you about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and I'll especially talk about Andrew Jackson. While Harriet Tubman was fighting against slavery and helped preserve this union, Andrew Jackson was a slaveholder raping black women and little black girls. Andrew Jackson. And they put Jackson's face on this bill. His face should have been on a wanted poster. And it should have been wanted dead or alive. 5 cents if alive, $5,000 if dead. See, it's not against the law to suggest that somebody kill a president who's already dead. But if you say that against a lunatic who's currently in the White House, they could say that you are on the verge of committing a crime. Well, now, I'm not that stupid, and neither are you all. And you know how to apply things that you hear. Harriet Tubman's face was to replace, as the dominant image on the $20 bill, that of a slaveholder. Can you imagine, you women, let's say that we were in a country where black people are in control, and I look over there and I say, I see old Walls there. I think I'm gonna have her today. And against her will, I bring her, I have somebody strip her clothes off, and I have sex with her against her will. And she had better not resist unless she's ready to die. How would you feel about that if a black man was doing it to a white woman? And let's say she resisted. So I kill her. I can kill her if I want. She's my property. So I kill her. Then I see Senator Crawford, but that's not her name in those days. So I say, now she has seen what I did to Walls, I'm going to see if she wants to follow the same path. And although Khrushchev wasn't alive at that time, he made a comment which I've mentioned on this floor to explain why Francis Gary Powers did not bite into that poison capsule when they shot down his U-2 spy plane and captured him over Russian territory. Americans couldn't understand why he didn't commit suicide like a good patriotic American, and Khrushchev, godless Khrushchev, explained it to them. Living things want to go on living. And as a slaveholder, I know that too. So having allowed Crawford to see what I did to Walls when she resisted, I say now, which is worse to you? After what I do, I'll let you go take a bath if you want to. You can pray to your God or whatever you do to cleanse your soul if you feel that it was contaminated. But if you don't, then you're dead just like she was. And the feet of those who carried her carcass out of here are at the door right now ready to drag you out of here if you resist. So she doesn't resist. How do you like that? You don't even like me to talk about it, do you? How do you think I feel about the black women and black girls who were subjected to that by people that you all honor? You put that racist, slaveholder, sex trafficker on the $20 bill. And you know what? To show that I'm not crazy, I won't throw away the money that has his face on it just because I don't like him. So here's what that lying coward did. You know why I call him a coward? He got a doctor to say he had some bone spurs in his heel and he couldn't go to the military. It just happened that he was very rich. I told you all that I thought that one of the reasons Deutsche Bank in Germany might have continued to lend money to him and to his son or his son-in-law, even after they had defaulted on loans going into the millions, I thought there might be some money laundering or other inappropriate activity going on because Trump did have connections in this country. Other people with that high profile were not interested in doing business with Deutsche Bank. So Trump's name was beneficial to them. Well, now it comes out over the news, they didn't say it was money laundering, but there were employees of Deutsche Bank who were aware of irregularities with reference to how they were dealing with Trump and whatever member of his family was also involved. You all don't pay attention to that because you're narrow-minded. Your scope is limited, but things that that lunatic does will have an impact down here. Ask the farmers. Ask the farmers. But to show how canny he is, he ordered $16 billion to be made available to buy off these farmers. $16 billion. And he has to do that because of the harm they're suffering from his ill-advised, ill-conceived trade war with China. Although Steve Bannon doesn't work for him anymore, that's the one who's calling the shots. And that crazy guy named Bolton is pushing him into bad things in the Middle East. You all can ignore it if you want to, but when your country's at war, it's going to be a different kind of war than when they attacked Iraq, when they went into Afghanistan, because Iran does have an air force, Iran does have missiles, and nobody knows what nature of nuclear weapons they may have. And Iran is in a position to strike back, which Iraq and Afghanistan were not. And Trump has given some low-hanging targets by bringing all these ships right within range of whatever Iran wants to do. And you all watch it. And you're going to ignore me, but just watch what happens. At any rate, this coward decided that Harriet Tubman should not be on the $20 bill, but Andrew Jackson, whose portrait you often see behind Donald Trump when he's giving his talks to the media or to the public. a man honoring a slave holder because he hates the race so much of a woman who fought for this country. And Harriet Tubman, you think she didn't know what these racists in the South would do if they got their hands on her again? She had more courage in her little finger than Trump's whole family and all those in this country like him have got. They not only throw the rock and hide their hands, they attack from ambush, as was done yesterday. As was done yesterday in my absence, against one of their own. Then these racist men here are going to tell you, we want to put these onerous conditions on getting an abortion because we care about white women. You showed what they care about white women, didn't you? Didn't you? The cowards. And then couldn't face the one they were going to do their dirt to. You all know when I'm coming, I don't attack you out of ambush. I might surprise you at how hard I will fight. And if I'm going to get you, I might tell you, you'll know it when the time comes. Who didn't know that I was against Senator Breezy's bill? Who didn't know that?
It's time, Senator. You may continue, Senator Chambers.
Who doesn't know that I'm against LB 720? And I'm going to digress because it gives me a chance to direct some things to my colleagues here. You all on Senator who were thought you were going to get support on Senator Breezy's bill, your colleagues just slapped you. Those farmers are stupid. We'll make them think we're going to give them something and get their vote to move 720 on. That's what we're going to do because they're dumb. We can insult them. Then we can come over and say, well, let's all get together. Yeah. Let's forget it. Let bygones be bygones. And I'm going to go down in my office when LB 720 comes up because the introducer of the bill gets to decide what motions, what amendments are offered. I have an amendment up there to prohibit discrimination against all those categories that currently are protected, and I would add those you can't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. That would cover my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. Oh, they are my brothers and sisters. If my name was Roger James and Jesse and Frank James did bad things, they're still my brothers. I don't like what they did. But as long as my name is James and theirs is James, we came from the same mama and daddy, we're brothers. These people I see as my brothers and sisters, and I feel a greater kinship to them than I do to you all, because they're under constant assault. Those racist, bigot, homophobes you all sent to Washington would not support a measure that would provide protection to our brothers and sisters. You all are Christians and I'm not. Y'all the ones who talk about brotherhood. Well, what about another hood? Because you consider them the others. Your Christianity doesn't reach that far, does it? But you'll use that Christianity and hide behind it so you can discriminate against them on the basis of your Christianity. That's what you say your Christ is about. Your Christ. If Christ is like what you all say he was, he got what he deserved. He was a bigot. He was a misogynist. He was a liar. He was a cheat. He was a betrayer. And what you sow, the Bible told you, be not deceived, God is not mocked. What you sow, that shall you also reap. Your Christ reaped what he sowed. And since it's recorded in the Bible, we have to take it as true. And then he did like a lot of you all will do. When the end finally came, what did he say? Like a weak, sniveling coward. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And if that Jesus who was hanging on that cross was like what you all are. And if God that he prayed to existed, all that other people would have heard was thunder, and maybe have seen some lightning that's usually thrown in for good measure. And that God would have told him, you know that I said, what you sow, you will reap. You have been a rapist. You have been a liar. You have been a cheat. You have been a deceiver. You know what was in store for you.
1 minute.
You knew that this was coming, but you thought because I'm your daddy, I'd give you a break. Well, you are a person, and I am no respecter of persons. Get away from me. And he died like a thief, executed in the way that you executed common, low-down criminals. Then you want to tell me he ought to be worshiped? And I look at your conduct, you say you believe in him? You act like thieves, common criminals, liars, cheats, cowards. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, you're recognized for a third opportunity.
You all thought I would fold and get tired, didn't you, because I'm old? Well, I'm like these people who run long distances. The farther they run, they start to get what's called the second wind. I haven't used up my first wind yet. So let me come back from the distant past to today. I told you all this morning what I was going to do. I didn't trick you. The speaker knew because we talked about it. Now, here's where you might get a surprise. You might have done something to me that you thought I didn't know about, and then to teach you a lesson, because I've often said, experience is the best teacher, and some will have no other. So to teach you, you might get something from me that I didn't tell you about, but I let you know, and you were in a position to defend yourself. What you all did to my female colleague was to cut off her arms, cut off her legs, wrap her in chains, throw her in the water, and said, take care lest you drown. And they know that they took away any possibility of her being able to save her life. That imagery might let you all get an understanding of how I feel about those who did that underhanded bit of dirt. They know who they are. We all know who they are. The document that they signed is on my desk. And for those who are watching who may not know, sincerely, dear Mr. O'Donnell, who is the clerk of the legislature, this letter is to inform you of our objection to LB 533 being placed on consent calendar. LB 533 addresses a topic which we feel requires more debate from the body than would be affordable on consent calendar. Sincerely, Steve Erdman, District 47, Rob Clemens, District 2. Putting Rob is right. The other three letters that would make Robber were not there, but he was right. Rob Clemens, Dave Merman, John Lowe. Sometimes a person's name is an index into what that person might do. And I'm surprised that even Senator Lowe, with things that have happened in the past, would do something like this, because he testified to try to get me out of this legislature by saying I don't live where I live. And the guy who was trying to have that done talked to Senator Lowe. They're buddies. They met at the shooting range. That's why people who want to carry these guns, I watch. Anyway, what they did is what set me off this morning. And some people figured that when I'd find out about it, there'd be a price that I was going to make people pay, the entire body, because it was done before the entire body. And they were not mistaken, and I did not let them down. But now I'm going to read this article about Harriet Tubman. And remember, this might be my third time on that particular motion, but I get a chance to
1 minute.
close, so I'll be able to finish this article. Washington, Associated Press. The headline, Tubman $20 bill design delayed past 2020. Washington. The redesign of the $20 bill to feature 19th century abolitionist leader Harriet Tubman has been delayed, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin said this week. He's the secretary who is protecting Trump by violating the law, and he's working for a thief and a liar and a criminal. Oh, and a sexual assaulter, serial sexual assaulter, married more than once. Christians don't believe in that, but he's a Christian.
Senator Chambers, it's time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Would you recognize closing your bracket?
Thank you. Continuing the article. The decision to replace Andrew Jackson, the nation's 7th president, with Tubman on the $20 bill had been made by Mnuchin's predecessor, former Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew, L-E-W, who had served in the Obama administration. Tubman's fate had been in doubt since the 2016 campaign based on critical comments by then-candidate Donald Trump that she was reaching for something. That's lie number 2. He saw the cell phone. If anything, the new footage raises more questions about why Bland was hauled off to jail to begin with. It shows that the only person who was a threat that day was Encenia. The one who should have been afraid for her life was Bland. 3 days later, she was found hanged in a jail cell. Authorities ruled it a suicide. I'm thrilled that Bland won't shut up and go away. I am Sandra Bland. Every African American woman is. Black women in particular cannot allow her story to be silenced. We cannot allow this tragedy that exemplifies the bottom tier justice black women often receive go unchallenged. We cannot do what everyone seems to want us to do, forget about it, and move on. It is easy to imagine how terrified she must have been that day. Sure, she was talking tough, but as an advocate against police brutality, she was well aware that such confrontation with law enforcement officials often don't end well for black people. And while black men most often are the targets, there have been enough cases in recent years to show that black women can face the same fate. Rekia Boyd, R-E-K-I-A, was hanging out with friends when Chicago police killed her. Charlena Lyles, Lyles, of Seattle, was pregnant with her fourth child when police shot her to death after she summoned them to her home for a burglary. 7-year-old Ayana, Ayana, Stanley Jones, was sleeping when police barged into her home in Detroit looking for a murder suspect and ended up shooting her. There are many others. Some argue, in the trooper's defense, that Bland should have kept quiet. So, to not keep quiet if you're a black woman is a death sentence, and that's what white people say. You know how these cops are. Why did you smart off? We cannot speak, and you pledge allegiance to that rag. Well, you pledge allegiance to it. You'll never get me to do it. And I'll never stop reminding that that you're lying through your teeth every time you say, this is a nation with liberty and justice for all. See, your women are not being shot dead by black cops. Your women are not calling the cops to report a burglary, then getting killed yourself. Your white women, pregnant, are not being shot dead by the police. They're your heroes, not ours. That's why I made that comment. These white men wanted to carry guns because they said they were afraid of ISIS. I said, our ISIS are the police. I said it then, and I say it now, and I mean it. I'll stop now, Mr. President, because my time's probably up.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, you're recognized for your closing.
And I think I can finish it up with this. Thank you, Mr. President. Some argue in the trooper's defense that Bland should have kept quiet, that she should have acted more respectful toward him. She's a grown woman. What does she have to do? Be respectful to somebody who's telling you, I will light you up? I'll tell you what, if I ever go off the deep end, you just imagine what might be done, and it won't be the stupid kind of things that some of these crazy white people do, but you'll know that I was there. And it's difficult to maintain your mental balance when you can read the history of your people, then see bad things like this continuing to happen. And then the white people tell us, well, you should have been quiet and you should have been more respectful toward him. They still place all of the blame for what happened upon her. They refuse to acknowledge how disrespectful he was to her, or to hold him accountable for his part in escalating the situation. As in most confrontations involving African Americans and law enforcement officials, Bland became the offender and Encenia the victim. She knew that she could not trust authorities or their dashboard cameras to tell the truth. That's why she refused to put her cell phone down even when the trooper demanded it. 4 years after her death, we know that she was right to keep recording. Though a grand jury failed to indict Encenia on criminal charges related to Bland's death, it did recommend perjury charges for lying about the events leading up to Bland's arrest. The trooper was fired, and eventually the charges were dropped in exchange for an agreement that he never worked in law enforcement again. Bland's family has never bought the suicide claims. They insist that there is more to Bland's death than what they have been told. The family's attorney said the cell phone video was never turned over to them for use in the federal lawsuit they settled with the Texas Department of Public Safety, but state officials insist that it was. After seeing the 39-second footage obtained by a news reporter, Bland's family wants the investigation into her arrest and death to be reopened. They want to know if there was a cover-up and if other evidence has been hidden. Several presidential candidates, including Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke, both of Texas, have joined the call. Many other voices have joined in too. But it is Sandra Bland, leading the call. She spoke directly to us through her cell phone video. Justice can only be served if we pay attention to what she has to say. That will be all the time I'm going to take this morning on that. How much time do I have on this, Mr. President?
1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I had said that I was going to go down in my office when the battle starts on LB 720, but the introducer had indicated to me that there might be a couple of things he'd like to ask me on the mic, and he would do it as soon as he could. So I'll stay up here for that. Then I am going to go down and watch the scorpions fight like scorpions in a bottle. And I'm going to see how dumb these farmers are, and having been slapped around, tricked, bamboozled, and hoodwinked, swallow spit, roll over, and do what they said they wouldn't do, and it will show that what their tricksters had indicated by their own conduct that they knew the ones tricked and bamboozled would do. Thank you, Mr. President. I will withdraw that motion to reconsider.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. The motion is withdrawn. Is there anything further on the bill, Mr. Clerk? Nothing further on the bill. Senator Hanson for motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that LB 436 advance to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 436 advances. Speaker Scheer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I originally had anticipated perhaps being able to work through the lunch hour today. Some of you may be wondering what we're doing. I will be breaking for lunch approximately noon. I'd like to get an hour into 7:20. We will not have an hour and a half. We will have an hour break, so we're back at 1 o'clock and be able to finish that up. And then there is approximately an hour and a half of final reading. So if you're looking at a time frame, we're probably going to be out of here around 4:30. I would be my best guess. And again, we will break for lunch at noon, but it will be an hour lunch, not the standard hour and a half. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign LB 533. We'll now proceed on the agenda to select file Speaker Major Proposal LB 720. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, for 720, Senator Slama, I have enrollment and review amendments.
Senator Slama, for motion.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 720 be adopted.
Senator McAllister, your speaking light is on, but can we move the ENRs first? Thank you, Senator. The motion before us is to adopt the ENR amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ENR amendments are adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, then, consistent with the 720 status as a major proposal, the next amendment to be offered is Senator Stinner, AM 1975.
Senator Stinner, you're recognized to open on AM 1975.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, AM 1975 is the result of a collaborative effort between the Chambers of Commerce and individuals in this body who seek to place fiscal guardrails in place for LB 720 going forward. With AM 1975, we are establishing a base authority of $125 million for the first 4 fiscal years for this program. We are asking that, in addition to the estimates required already established in the legislation, the Director of the Department of Economic Development shall project an estimate of refunds and tax credits utilized for the upcoming 3-year, provided by applicants twice a year. If the reporting per the new section of Imagine Nebraska indicates refunds and tax credits that are at or above the base authority for any upcoming year, then the Department of Economic Development will submit an analysis to the Executive Board of the Legislature explaining why the forecasts are trending at or above this base authority. During this process, no new applications will be approved for Imagine Nebraska Act and will earn credits in the years following the year in which the base authority utilization is projected, unless the Executive Board of the Legislature approves a request to exceed the base authority. In other words, what we're trying to do is to stop the process, take a look at what our fiscal posture is within our state, and then what the trajectory of these credits are, and try to reach a decision whether we go above, whether we stop, or how we proceed forward. The Executive Board has 45 days after notice to the Department of Economic Development to decide whether or not to exceed the base authority. If the Executive Board of the Legislature does not grant the final decision within 45 days, the request to exceed the authority will automatically be approved. For the first 4 years, the base authority equals $125 million. After fiscal 2023 and 24, the base authority will be adjusted to 3% of the total gross general fund receipts for the most recent 3 years, and then reset again the next 3 years. That will take us to the end of this legislation. There's also adjustments being made in this legislation to mitigate any general funds impact for the biennium. I would like to thank Senator Bowles, Vargas, Senator Lathrop, Senator McDonald, Senator Coulterman, and others who came together to work out this language after the bill was advanced from general file yesterday afternoon. We are all in agreement that this language will satisfy some of the concerns that were raised during the hearing process and general file, that Imagine Nebraska Act will exceed the expectations of fiscal analysts and provide greater budget clarity going forward with our economic incentive program. And if you will, I don't know if I'll get back into the queue. I would like to talk about, because there is a concern about predictability. There was a concern about initially the fiscal note was way lower than what actually happened. And you have to understand that the fiscal office deals with, in a very constricted time framework, all of the variables that they have to deal with to get a fiscal note put together that replicates what happens in that biennium. So, but predictability since that time, since the Department of Revenue provides us the information, and they actually provide both the Chair of Revenue and myself an estimate every month of refunds and credits as we move forward. They've been fairly close, and I think if you look at what they prepared the last 10 years, variability is about 5.9%. Run rate's about 120 to 130 million, so it's fairly predictable, but 720, actually, the way it's crafted, it will become even more predictable. So we will be able to stay, I think, on top of where the trajectory of these are, given the fact that maybe there's one or two big ones. We'll have to adjust our expectations and certainly get ourselves ready to take on bigger projects and significant projects if we have to. The other thing that I want to talk about is when we have uncertainty, and you've heard me talk about this, I will talk about it till I leave here, is balance sheet management. Uncertainty means you have to have some kind of resource, some kind of fund over here that takes care of that variability. And that's the rainy day fund. Now, I intentionally backed off the rainy day fund, put it into property tax relief because that was a priority within this body. Now we're providing $275 million, and if you're thinking in terms of proper property tax relief, it's $1 billion. We're 27.5% there. If we'd have passed Senator Breezy's bill, we would have been 37 or 40% the way there to that $1 billion, the way there to get those legs put together. But we have, through the budgeting process, taken in receipts from income and sales, held our expenses down, and put dollars into property tax relief. The other thing I want to talk about, there was some concern about when you take a look at these tax credits. Gosh, a lot of them are going, or a majority are going for brick and mortar and equipment. Well, think about it. What's the biggest expense that somebody has is coming here, building a plant, somebody that's expanding a plant? It's the brick and mortar. But what does that do for you? It builds permanency. Permanency. Somebody that comes in and spends that kind of money, and here's a case study of Beck and Dickinson, I'll refer to it later. That's permanency. They're looking 30, 40 years, 50 years to be here, to employ that employment base, to pay the real estate taxes. To pay the real estate taxes. And in the Beck and Dickinson example, if you just pick that up and take a look at it, over a 10-year period of time, The tax credits were about $14.5 million. 10-year period of time, they paid $12.5 million in real estate taxes. Is that not a payback? Is that not putting together an annuity stream? Is that not property tax relief? But then we have this, oh, we're not going to give you 720 because we need property tax relief. This is the linkage to property tax. It is part of that puzzle. And if you're open-minded enough right now, you will understand and look at this. And then take a look at the budget book. Take a look at the page that shows revenue growth in our state. That revenue growth has gone from $2 billion 20 years ago to over $5 billion projected now. How does that happen? Well, some of it has to do with incentives. Some of it has to do with the fact that businesses are growing, people are getting employed, and the net effect is what has happened here, along with inflation. So those are some of the things that we need to decide upon, to look at, to calculate, and I would think that we would make a prudent decision. This is definitely some of the most important legislation. We need to send a signal out to business, out to different states, that we are in the business of attracting and retaining our businesses in the state of Nebraska, our jobs in the state of Nebraska. I sit next to Wyoming. You know, we talk about and compare Iowa and Missouri. I sit next to Wyoming. 0 tax rate, folks. 0 tax rate. Guess what? They have a robust incentive program. They'll build you a building. We just lost 30 jobs in western Nebraska because Wyoming said, we'll build that building for you. We'll pay your moving costs. 0 income tax, and they have a robust incentive program. Start to think about this in terms of how we compete, how we move forward, how we grow Nebraska, how we actually move forward the receipts of our state, how we stabilize our state from a balance sheet side to relieve some of the uncertainties. How much time do I have?
1 minute.
I'm going to yield my time to Senator Colderman.
Senator Colderman,
Get a start.
50 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Colleagues, we're at the 82nd day of this legislative session. I'm going to take this bill in a different direction today. I hope I've asked a lot of people to yield me time. I don't have a lot of time right now. But I want you to think about something as we move forward today. This bill 720 is not us versus them. That's not how we work here. I think we have to change the dialogue. We started talking about that a little bit this morning. What this bill about is, to me, is how do we grow our state? We have many, many common values. We have strong, hard-working work ethic in this state, and it's a great place to raise a family. So as we go forward, I don't have a lot of time, but I do want you to know that I'm going to try and change the dialogue. It's
Senator
important
Coltman.
for me that this bill passes.
Senator Coltman, that's time, but I neglected to give you a couple minutes this morning to open and refresh us on the bill. So why don't you take 2 minutes, and then you're next in the queue also.
Thank you very much. So as we talk about this today, I want it to be a very civil conversation. I don't want to hear that I don't support this because I don't get this, and I don't support this because I don't get that. I don't think we should do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that many of you are going to face. This is a very difficult bill to vote on. Many of you are thinking about re-election. Many of you are thinking about, what are my colleagues back home going to say? I can tell you this. Right now, as we speak, you're getting pressure from Farm Bureau, NSEA, Farmers Union, Open Sky, and somebody's giving robocalls to your offices telling you to vote against this bill. On the other hand, you've had arms twisted by the Omaha Chamber, the Lincoln Chamber, the State Chamber, individual business people to vote yes. What do the newspapers say? We got the Omaha World Herald. I think they've been somewhat fair, but they weigh in. NET weighs in, Lincoln Journal weighs in, TV, radio stations. They ask you questions, or the headlines. They're trying to sell papers, right? Do you have your 33 votes? How many times have you seen that in the paper? I feel used and betrayed. I feel that way at times myself. What are you going to do if this fails? Good questions. But the answers have to come within these 49 people that are here. You know, when I signed up for this job,
Senator Coltman, you're now on your time, 5 minutes.
thank you. I didn't know what to expect. Many of us don't. And I'm talking to a lot of the freshmen. This is your first session. It's a long session. I had asked Senator Chambers, but I think he wore himself out. He might be back now. But Senator Chambers often talks about integrity on this floor. How our word is our bond. I sat right where Senator Arch sat, or sitting right now, the first 2 years I was here. I got to know Senator Chambers really well. And in fact, when I came here, I asked to be seated somewhat close to him so I could pick his brain and ask him questions. 2 years was enough, but irregardless, and I've told him that. But I got to know him. And when I came down here, I decided, you know, there's going to be some tough issues. I didn't realize how tough it was going to be. Death penalty issue. Try that one on for size. I studied that hard during the summer I was running. You know, the fact is, I'm a pro-life person. I don't think we should do abortions, and I don't think we should put criminals to death. And those pressures they're real pressures, folks. We had, on the death penalty hearing, we had 15 to 16 hours of very good debate on this floor. And it was respectful debate. And I would tell you that after general file, after select file, after final reading, and even after the veto override that we did to the governor, we walked out of this room as friends and colleagues, respectful of each other's positions. You think about that, everybody said to me, oh, you just killed yourself at your chance for running for re-election. It didn't work that way. I got more votes on this election than I did that one, and I voted to repeal the death penalty. Because people send us here because they respect us. They trust us. They know that if you tell them you're going to do something, they're going to be with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about what drives me. So bear with me. Not all of you knew my wife. Many of you did. It's been less than 2 years since I lost her to pancreatic cancer. Toughest 2 years of my life, the last 2 years. And the 2 years before that were tougher yet. Senator Dorn, you said a couple of times to me, you're always smiling, Senator Colderman. My wife wrote a book. We found it after she had died. What I've learned in 60 years of life school. One of the things in there is, if you smile, those little lines around your lips don't show as badly. I think that was meant more for women, but it's what she wrote. Some other things that I try to lead my life by is take time later in the evening to sit with your loved ones and converse. I prefer on the deck in a lawn chair with a glass of wine. For me, it's a glass of scotch. As we talk about this, I consider you all friends. You're all colleagues.
1 minute.
Thank you. She says, love people unconditionally. Look at each person as if they're Christ. Have lots of friends and appreciate each of their unique talents and characteristics. And this is probably the most important thing that she taught me in 47 years of marriage. Keep work obligations in perspective. Do not let it consume your life. In many regards, the last month, I've let this bill consume my life. And it's a challenge because I want to see it pass, and I think it's what's best for the state. But I also have some other concerns, and I'm going to bring those up. I've talked to a few of you, so if I get the time, I have some questions. I've given you all ahead of time a chance about what I'm going to ask you. So keep an open mind. Let's move the dialogue to the point where
That's time, Senator.
we can discuss this in a relevant, conscientious manner. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Colsman. Senator Stinner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I'd just like to kind of revisit a few topics about incentives. Why do we need incentives? Are they important? And the answer to that is it definitely is. And all we have to do is look at the fact, 2 governor cups in a row. 2 governor cups in a row for economic development. Incentives do matter on that. I also want to pull your attention. Do we need incentives? Look around. Obviously, different states have different incentive programs. I have business relationships and businesses in Colorado. Colorado gave their municipal golf course to an aerospace company in California to come there. Gave 9-hole golf course so that they could get built, so that they could attract and get this built. Incentives do matter. Incentives do matter because even an Amazon that was going to New York City ran and was rebuffed by the local politicians and some of the state politicians, and sure, they could have paid that $8 billion, but they walked away. Incentives matter. We're here for the well-being, for the entire state well-being and safety of our citizens. This is a big deal. This says whether we're open for business or whether we're not open for business. And I just want to talk a little bit about, maybe if we go back to the budget, we talk about growth. It's kind of interesting. Over the past 37 years, our average growth is 4.9%. Obviously, we're in a substandard growth period, but I'm thinking business cycle-wise, we'll start to recycle out of this. Hopefully, we've seen the start of it as it relates to the fact that last month we were $80-some million over that. It looks like this month is going to be in fairly good shape. I'm hoping that we end up and add quite a little bit to that rainy day fund, because remember, we passed on putting the $50 million in the name of property tax relief. But interestingly, over that 37-year period of time, 14 years, you had revenue below the line, below the average. It averaged 1.2%. 23 years was above the line and averaged 7.3%. So hopefully we'll start to cycle back out into that 5 to 6 to 7% growth pattern. And then if we can restrain some of the spending back down, we can add to the property tax relief fund and incrementally get there. Although I would be more, I'd look at more in line with what Senator Breezy put, where we can add some more dollars. We can take a look at this tax code, that we can freshen this tax code. We can look at income tax along with property tax. We can look at tax credits for the less fortunate as part of a package. I think that's the smart way to go forward. But I look at history and I look back and I look at 775. It was contentious, but we were losing businesses at that time. They were being solicited directly. People were writing checks out, state of Iowa, Missouri, et cetera. And so 775 came in as a contentious legislation. And the only reason I look at the Nebraska Advantage Act is because we didn't have term limits during that time. And there was a consistency. There was a look back to 775. There was a look back over that period of time so people can measure the positive reaction to 775 and they updated into the Nebraska Advantage Act. Now, the Nebraska Advantage Act, many times you're saying, oh, that hasn't paid for itself. That hasn't paid for itself. Well, it's created a $100 million annuity stream to the state of Nebraska, according to the Nebraska Department of Revenue. And all you have to do over a 10-year period of time is add that up. There's $1 billion of growth that will come in that we can utilize to pay for the services and certainly for budgeting purposes. So when you invest in this, it's long-term. When you invest in the incentive program, you're asking people to invest long-term. You're asking businesses to invest long-term. Creates annuity streams. It creates annuity streams in property tax. It creates an annuity stream in utility utilization. It creates an annuity stream in terms of income tax and also personal property tax. Local, state benefits big time from it. People come to our state, they build houses, and guess what? In those houses, there's probably 4 or 5 people who buy things and pay sales tax.
That's time, Senator.
Who build homes.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. The bottom line, and I'll get to it quickly, is incentives work. We've seen them work since 775 was started, along with Nebraska Advantage, and the $30 billion of brick and mortar that Senator Stinner talked about that is on the tax rolls, the 100,000 jobs that have been created. Yes, there's a cost, and yes, there were and are some problems with 775 and also Nebraska Advantage, and that's what I am so pleased about Imagine Nebraska, that we are catching the baggage up that was on that cart and doing those fixes that make it more transparent, high-wage jobs, using the base authority concept to limit and know how much we're going to spend. I think the elephant in the room is that voting against this because LB 183 failed makes no sense. They're not the same issue. Many of us supported LB 183 along with 289 before that, put our name on a sheet and did that the best we could. A good friend of mine who happens to be a psychologist wrote a book, and I would remind us all of this. He said that human beings will only react in one of 3 ways when faced with adversity, and Senator Coulterman talked about voting, and I would like to add to that, voting isn't easy, it isn't fun, but it's what we do. Human beings react in one of 3 ways. They quit, they blame, and that's what I see people doing in here, quitting and blaming. Take your ball and go home because I didn't get my way on this stuff. Cut your nose off to spite your face. Don't work with people across the aisle because they're the enemy. Or you do number 3. You step up and accept the responsibility of working together for positive change. You step up and accept the responsibility of working together for positive change. That's what LB 720 is all about. Looking at what's worked, fixing it, making it better, building a future. We can do that. We can do that today. I ask you to not quit, not blame, and please step up. I yield the balance of my time to Senator Coulterman.
Thanks, Senator Williams. Senator Coulterman, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Senator Williams. We have a correction to make. Senator Stinner thought we had 2 governor's cups. It's been 3 in a row. We got a note indicating it's been 3 in a row. So we do have a lot to build on, a lot to be proud of. I'm going to talk a little bit about the farm economy, how important it is to our state. Because I think people need to understand that this isn't about just the business community. The business community and the agriculture community have to work hand in hand. If we don't do that, we don't have a state. So, what do we do in this state? We grow cheap food. The farmer doesn't get a fair shake. We grow cheap food and it's subsidized in many cases. But what do we do with that cheap food? We feed the world with it. So we need processing plants, but we need the farmer to grow the grain. We need the farmer to grow the chickens or the cows or the sheep. It's cheap food. If you opened up the paper this morning, I read both the papers, farmers are going to get $16 billion in aid this year. They don't want that. I'm going to ask a few questions here of some people in a minute, but $16 billion in aid, why is that? It's because we have tariffs or trade barriers that are affecting our agricultural producers. You know what it was last year? It was $11 billion. That's $27 billion in 2 years that we have to give our farmers so that they can stay afloat and feed this world. And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? We're the most productive country in the world. Things need to happen here. Since I've had the pleasure of being raised in a small community, farming community, I've seen set-aside programs where they've paid farmers not to plant their crops.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Senator Hughes announces some special guests today. We have with us former State Senator Tom Vickers and his wife, Gerda, both from McCook and Farnham, with us under the north balcony. Could Senator Vickers and his wife please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature? Continuing discussion, Senator Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the balance of my time to Senator Coulterman.
Thanks, Senator Howard. Senator Coltman, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Senator Howard. Set-aside programs. How many in this room know what a set-aside program is from the community, other than farmers? It's where farmers are asked to not grow crops. They get paid not to grow crops because we have an overabundance. We don't see those too much anymore, but we have some of that yet. Subsidy payments. You know what a subsidy payment is? We talk about them behind people's backs. The subsidies that farmers get from the federal government because they don't get their price supports. I'm going to ask some people about that here in a minute. How do they work? I don't know how they work. We have bushels per acre for price supports. I don't understand how that works. I would like to ask Senator Friesen a couple of questions if he'd yield.
Senator Friesen, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
Senator Friesen, thank you. First, I need to start out by saying I owe you an apology because I attacked you on the floor the other day. It wasn't intended to, but I did, and I'm sorry for that.
Apology accepted. No problem.
Thank you. You've been a farmer for many, many years. How many years has it been?
40-some.
You've got your kids back on the farm today. Is that one of the reasons you farm?
That was one of the reasons, but I didn't try to entice them back. No, I wanted them to give them the opportunity.
In the market system that we have today, there are price supports. Would you as a farmer prefer price supports, or would you rather have just a free market and a system without subsidies? Would you talk a little bit about that so our colleagues could understand how that works, please?
Sure. There are price supports currently. Our subsidies currently are zero. The system, which the last Farm Bill is one I can say that I've had a part in writing, was designed to be a safety net as we transitioned from $8 corn down to where I thought it would be in the $3 range, unfortunately. A lot of farmers didn't believe it would go down that far. So what it was is a series of payments as the corn price collapsed, and when they got to the bottom, the idea was they would go to zero so that we didn't influence planting decisions. Planting decisions should be based solely on market demand. And I think all farmers would prefer market price. They don't want subsidies. They don't want our market facilitation payments that were being offered. They would rather be working at the world market price, which is what we operate on. It's what we're based on.
On a small farm, and I think you farm quite a few acres, but on an average farm, can an average farm in today's environment support more than one family?
No. Average farm size in Nebraska right now is 975 acres. If you were strictly like a young farmer starting out and you have to rent land, I don't know that without your wife or spouse, there's some nice ladies that are farming these days already. I don't know if your spouse isn't working in town and having benefits that you could make it on 1,000 acres.
Thank you for answering those questions. How much time do I have?
Just a little bit over a minute.
I think I'll wait because I've got some questions. I'm going to ask Senator Groney next time I get on the mic. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Senator Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and still good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of LB 720 and the underlying amendment. I'll just talk briefly and then yield my time to Senator Colterman, but observing this bill has been pretty interesting from the hearing to our debate in Revenue Committee to general file and then select. Being 5 years in, some of the best legislation that I've observed comes with a push and pull, and certainly LB 720 has had a push and pull aspect to it. There have been a lot of people who have worked on this bill, and I want to commend Senator Colterman for his work on this. He's been very open to suggestions from all different groups. And like I said on general file, this isn't about what, if I didn't get my way, I'm going to take it out on LB 720. I've had plenty of times down here, friends of mine who have fought against bills, that I stand today on this bill, who I had to come back and vote for one of their bills, literally the next bill that was on the agenda. Senator Groney was right in this. You need to take the emotion out of it and look at the policy. Now, if you don't believe that the policy is good, I can understand that, I do. But to take it out on LB 720 because we weren't able to accomplish other things is not the way to go about this. And I want to tell you that I think after this session we need to reset, refocus, and make sure we do address those issues that are also important to the vast members of the body. But with that being said, I would like to yield my time to Senator Colterman and thank him for his work on this.
Thanks, Senator Lindstrom. Senator Coltman, it's 3 minutes, 10 seconds.
Thank you again. Thank you very much, Senator Lindstrom. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Senator Groney, is Senator Groney here?
I think he may have, there he is.
Senator Groney, I was wondering if you'd yield to a couple of questions.
Senator Groney, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Groney, over the last 5 years, we've kind of had a love-hate relationship, but I consider us good friends. Would that be accurate?
Always loved you, man.
Thank you, Sunshine. Anyway, Senator Groney, have you and I worked closely this year on property tax relief?
Yes, the Revenue Committee did a great job, led by Senator Linehan, discussing both sides of this issue.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go in a little bit different direction. For a living, you've worked for co-ops. In recent years, you've been in machinery sales for quite a few years. You made good money at it, I know that. With commodity prices down the way they are, with inputs up, what's it like selling machinery right now?
Not good. Farmers are absolutely not sleeping at night. Can't make their property tax payments. Didn't have no money left over to buy anything from me, so it's not good. And I'm worried about their income taxes, by the way.
So you really need this $12,000 a year job then?
I do, and I want benefits.
Thank you, Senator Groney. Senator Breezy, would you yield to a question?
Senator Breezy, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Breezy, you probably threw us over the hump when it came to a cloture vote, you and your suggestion. I appreciate that. And I gave you a commitment that I'd work with you on property taxes. Do you think I've lived up to that commitment?
Yes, you have, Senator Colterman.
The circumstances are such that
1 minute.
You need leverage. I know you need leverage to get property taxes across. you have to make the decision whether you want to support this bill or not. I get that. But at the end of the day, do we trust each other?
Well, I'll talk about that later, how I cannot support this bill until property tax relief moves with it or simultaneously with it. But
I understand that, but do you trust me?
yes, I trust you, you bet.
Thank you very much. Less than a minute?
15 seconds.
I'll waive my time, thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of LB 720 and AM 1975. And I just think Senator Colderman has established the model for doing a collaborative effort on a bill. I haven't seen anything like it in my 5 years in this body, and I want to congratulate him for that. My last 10 years, I've been on the Platt Institute, was their director. I was on the Economic Development Committee for a couple of years, and then the last year I've been on the Revenue Committee. And it's a sad fact of life that in this current economic era, corporate incentive programs are what we need to do. They are a fact of life. Competition by states for new and expanding businesses is like any other form of competition. In our system, there will be winners and losers. And all of us want to keep Nebraska healthy, economically healthy, and we need to continue to do that. And this program, I think, LB 720, heads us in that direction. I think some of us know that there are contractors, business consultants, that their main job is to pit one state against another to get the best economic program they can get, to get the best incentive program they can get. And we have to play in that game if we want to be successful in Nebraska. I think we've recognized that LB 720 has important new features which provide vast improvements when compared to the previous and current program 775 in the Advantage Act. So I think we need to continue this effort. We need to be in the game, and Nebraska needs to be competitive, and I think we'll continue to be so with passage of 720. I yield the balance of my time to Senator Colderman.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. Senator Coltman, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Senator McAllister, and thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I was wondering if Senator Hunt would answer a question or two.
Senator Hunt, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Hunt, you're new. You've had a good start this year.
Thanks.
When you were running, I came and visited with you. We had a nice cup of coffee. I got a chance to meet your daughter and your ex-husband. I think we've had a good relationship. You're a business owner, a small business owner.
That's right.
Why do you do that?
Why am I an entrepreneur? Because I want to be free. I want to make my own decisions about how I make money and what I do to make an impact on my own community. I don't like to work for other people.
So what kind of challenges do you see as a small business owner? Have you ever had a chance to take advantage of any of the incentive type of programs that are either in Omaha or at the state level?
We take advantage of the Intern Nebraska program where we get help paying our interns.
So there are some programs available for even the small business owners.
Yep, we can get up to $5,000 of the pay that we give to our interns reimbursed.
Thank you. I appreciate your candid answers. Senator Dorn, would you yield to a question or two?
Senator Dorn, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Dorn, we've become pretty good friends since we've gotten here. You face the same challenges that Senator Freese and Senator Merman, most of the ag producers in this room face. Why do you farm?
That's something I grew up with. When I was younger, my dad farmed. That was something I loved, and that's something I am very, very glad I did that all my life.
And you've also had a terrific record of public service. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I served on some co-op boards and on some county boards, and been an EMT for 30 years, so I believe you, as a person, you need to give back to the community and to the state that you live in.
Thank you very much, Senator Dorn. Colleagues, I'm not trying to pick on people. I'm trying to show everybody in this room that we have a lot in common. Doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or whatever you are. We have to do these things together. I don't know if this bill will pass. I don't have a silver globe to look into that can say, yeah, it's going to pass or no, it's not. We have all these vote cards. There's probably a dozen of those around. Everybody's got a different number on it. I'm trying to point out the fact that we are here, number one, as Nebraskans. We are here.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Senator Groney.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the long term, I am in support of legislation that encourages free market business growth and removes regulatory barriers from business growth. But I'm against LB 720 in its present form. It is too rich in benefits. Way too much of the tax credit benefits in 720 are geared more as a tax cut for existing businesses, for normal business activities involving growth and replacement of depreciated assets. Nebraska is not a wealthy state. We aren't. Our citizens are overtaxed as is. Any new economic development plan that uses any of our limited tax dollars, and yes, these are tax dollars that are being used, must assure the public that every dollar used is maximized for new economic growth, not squandered on a normal growth of existing industries, not given to the lobby. This body has not had adequate time to vet the complicated language of this bill. We all need the interim to become knowledgeable on this bill. It only showed up in January, and they had a hard time searching for, the lobby did, for somebody to sponsor it, and Senator Coleman stepped up. Because LB 720 abates the taxes of a few businesses, it necessarily raises the taxes on the rest of Nebraska to provide the public services that this state needs. That's a fact. Somebody has to pay for the public services. And if their claims are accurate that more people are here and more people are using our public services, somebody has to pay for that. LB 720 has no pay for. It contrasts to the Revenue Committee's LB 289 that through adequate funding for public schools will give property tax relief to all Nebraskans, not just the privileged few. The sponsors of LB 720 need to come up with a plan to pay for their tax shift. Everybody who's brought property tax relief has been honest and has to pay for it. 720 doesn't. I have heard many comments on LB 289. It is too complicated, needs to be simpler. Has anybody really read LB 720? Have you read it, word for word? I would say it is more complicated than 289, but many of you are already to vote for it. Why? I have heard that 289 needs to get all the stakeholders on board. Wait a second. Agriculture, the largest industry in Nebraska, is against 720. Those who work for the largest government entity that uses tax dollars, the public school system employees, is against 720. Those are stakeholders. Those of you who will vote for 720 ask you why. The stakeholders against it. They're not all on board. Maybe they would be if we did it over the interim and we all looked at it a little closer. We need property tax relief. We need to control government costs through limiting government growth. We need income tax reform, and we need economic development growth. We need comprehensive government reform. I agree with Senator Stinner. We need to work together on this. Well, let's do it. Senator Colderman. LB 720 needs to be part of a comprehensive package along with LB 289. I am voting no on 720. It's not a crisis, folks. The sun sets another year. Anybody in the process who is applying now, if they get approved this year, they go through the full length of it of 10 or 15 years. We could easily do an emergency clause the first day of the session next year on a bill, the first time we have hearings, to extend the sunset date another year. There's no crisis here. Nobody is saying no to economic development. Some of us want to do it right. I look forward in this interim to work with my fellow senators. Hopefully the governor joins in. Some of the stakeholders get their opinion, but then tell them to leave the room.
1 minute.
This interim on the comprehensive package of tax reform through fair funding of our public schools, a rebalancing of our tax structure, and promoting economic growth through tax policy. This year, we have created the necessary ingredients, let's call it a cake, for a comprehensive cake of tax reform next year. This interim, we need to stir them together. Next session, we need to bake it into a final product. This is not a clean, good product, 720. It needs vetting. It needs refinement. It is not, you're going to burn the cake if you dump this on us now. Park it. Interim, we'll all get together. Senator, there'll be rumors about me and Senator Coleman. We'll be hanging around too much because we need to get together as interim and make one comprehensive bill. One comprehensive bill.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Groney. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Coulterman.
Thank you, Senator LeGrone. Senator Coulterman, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Senator LeGrone. I appreciate your hard work on this and appreciate you giving me a little bit of time. Well, Senator Groney, you haven't disappointed me. I knew you wouldn't get up and support the bill. I didn't expect that. But I do want to point out a couple of flaws in your logic. It would be unlike me not to do that, right? You say that it hasn't been vetted. Well, it has been vetted. It's had the vetting of the Department of Revenue, the Department of Labor, the Department of Economic Development, PRO, the governor's office, and the committee's had a lot of time to look at it. This bill has been vetted. But the most important thing I want to point out to you is this. I've sat in front of economic developers that want to move to my community. And they understand that they can get some incentives. I'm not a fan of incentives myself, but the reality is every state in the union has incentives. What's different about this bill that you seem to be discounting is we could wait another year. I don't disagree with that. But the reality is the reports that we got from legislative audit, the reports that we got from SRI, all indicate to us that the program that's in place is costing us more money than it needs to cost us. We have a way to improve on our long-term costs by limiting things, even by putting this base authority on it, the First Amendment that we're talking about right now. We have the ability to create better paying jobs with this program, jobs that are going to keep our people off of the Medicaid rolls. They're going to give them health insurance benefits. They're going to give them a living wage of $42,000 a year. So for people to say this isn't ready, a lot of research has gone into this. We spent all summer working on this bill, and I was privileged, feel very privileged to be asked to carry this bill. So to say that we aren't ready, it's just a fallacy. I do want to talk a little bit about the two amendments, the most recent amendments. Senator Vargas has an amendment that I hope we get to this afternoon. It's an amendment that deals with the makeup of a board of directors. I will tell you that I feel that both of these are friendly amendments, but that's up to the body to vote on. I'm not going to tell you how to vote on those. I think that we should support them. And this base authority, the financial rails that we're putting on here, caps, whatever you want to call them, I think that's a good amendment. And believe me, we worked hard and long on that, especially in light of the fact that we have a system that is a pay-for-performance system. If you don't create the jobs, if you don't make the financial investment in this state, if you apply, you still get nothing. So you don't get your incentives until you create the jobs and until you pay the money that you say you're going to pay to put in brick and mortar. I've got some more questions I'd like to ask some people. We're going to get to those probably not too early yet before lunch. But after lunch, I'm going to be asking some more questions about what they do and why they do them. I'm trying to build a case for the fact that agriculture and businesses can cohabitate, so to speak. And I think we're gonna get there. But I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Senator Coltsman. Senator Lathrop.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I'm in support of the bill and the amendment before you, 1975, offered by Senator Stenner. I wanted to take an opportunity to visit about the Stenner amendment and maybe make this observation. You'll remember on general file, I ask you to trust this process, move the bill along, and allow Senator Colderman an opportunity to address on select file the concerns that were expressed on general file. That's been done with AM 1975. I talked to a number of my colleagues, as did Senator Colderman, of course, about the concerns they had on general file. There were a number of you that expressed primarily 3 concerns that I heard. Now that you may have, there's a variety of other concerns, but of those people who were interested in supporting this bill, there were 3 concerns that were expressed. One was the pooling of hours so that we have actual full-time employees, and I think Senator Colderman has addressed that. That's found in AM 1975. There was also a question or an issue about benefits for these employees. That was another thing many of you wanted to see in the bill. That's also part of AM 1975. There was also some concern about what do we got to do to make sure this doesn't get away from us? Many of you said we need to see some caps on this so that it doesn't get away from us and we don't look back and go, oh my God, we just created a monster that we cannot afford. AM 1975 has a process in there. It provides for initial authority or base authority for this program. And then if we go through that base authority in creating jobs through this process, and the Department of Economic Development needs additional authority, there is a process. So we stop applications after $125 million. They stop. They can't take another one or do another one without additional authority once they've been through that base authority. Then the process is Director of Economic Development makes essentially an ask, and a hearing is held by our exec board. Why was our exec board chosen to be the gatekeeper, if you will, for additional authority? It's important because, and it is a logical place, it's where the university goes for their bonding authority, so there is some precedence for this. It's also good because we take and populate that board with 2 members from each legislative district. Now, when the Department of Economic Development, should they get to a place where they need additional authority, comes in and they say, we need additional authority, we've done these projects, they'll have to show or establish to the satisfaction of the exec board, our colleagues, that, by the way, includes the chair of Appropriations Committee as an ex officio. That's another reason it was chosen as the gatekeeper, if you will, for additional authority. They'll have to show what the history has been, what the projections are, what the costs are, and we have Appropriations Chair there to say, this is getting too rich. Cut it off. Shut it down, we can't afford this, or go ahead, they're creating the jobs they said they would, this makes sense, add additional authority. The exec board was also chosen because it's more nimble than trying to have the Appropriations Committee and this entire legislature approve the additional authority. We rely on the exec board to do a lot of things in our absence. This is just one more that will be added to their responsibilities. I'm comfortable with them doing this too, in terms of whether we can delegate that responsibility, because this is not a hard cap. It is authority, and they are and will be the gatekeeper for additional authority should this program be as successful as we hope it will be. Colleagues, I would encourage your support of 1975. I appreciate Senator Colderman and what I would call old school fashion, accommodating the concerns. I appreciate the willingness of this body to trust the process and move this bill to select file where those concerns have been addressed, I believe, in AM 1975. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Senator Slama.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today opposed to the advancement of LB 720. This isn't a position I've taken lightly. I appreciate the work that Senator Coulterman and countless others have put into this bill and understand the importance of having a competitive incentives program in Nebraska. I am opposed to LB 720's advancement this year for one simple reason. I refuse to prioritize corporate incentives over property tax relief. We still have another year to pass the Nebraska Advantage Act's replacement. Nebraska will not be closed for business if we fail to pass LB 720 this year. There is still time to improve this bill in the interim to make sure that Nebraskans are getting the biggest bang for their buck in economic development. This bill, in the last few days, has been rushed, and negotiations for LB 720, which has been championed as more transparent than the Nebraska Advantage Act, has shifted in the last couple of days to some closed-door deals and special interests pulling senators from this floor to either sweeten the deal or threaten them. I didn't come here to curry favor for special interests. I came here to serve District 1, which has spoken loud and clear. Outrageously high property taxes are the biggest hurdle to economic development and the biggest threats to our main streets. I'm voting no on LB 720 and would encourage each of you to consider if you're comfortable with being locked into this specific incentives program for the next decade. Perhaps your answer is a yes, but mine's a no. I want more time to work out the kinks of this program and to achieve sustainable, long-term property tax relief. Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to yield my remaining time to Senator Moorfeld.
Thanks, Senator Slama. Senator Moorfeld, 2 minutes 45.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Slama was right on track. She said she needed 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So I'll take the remainder of the 2 minutes and 45 seconds to explain why I'm voting no. I've already done that. I've been principled in this position. I have not changed my position. It's very different than some of the reasons that Senator Slama said and Senator Groney and others have said. For the last 5 years, I've tried to work with my local chamber and the state chamber to get support for critical economic development needs and critical supports for people in my district. Things like Medicaid expansion, things like minimum wage, things like paid family leave. And I've been patted on the back, patted on the head a little bit, told that these are noble causes, noble efforts, but they cannot be there with me. In many cases, they either actively oppose, or in some cases, they are neutral and actively oppose behind the scenes. I've got 3 more years left. I've got 3 more years left to pass substantive policy that will improve the economic well-being of my constituents in my district. In some cases, I've been able to go around the legislature and enact the change that I think is necessary, the vision that I see for our state. I've learned now not to put that in statute, but rather the Constitution, and to put deadlines and timelines and be much more specific, but we'll get to that in 2020. That being said, I have a lot of respect for Senator Coulterman. I have a lot of respect for Senator Stinner. I have a ton of respect for Senator Williams. I have a lot of respect for the other people and my colleagues that have worked hard on this, like Senator Wishart. But there comes a time after 5 years of being told no or thank you very much, leave,
1 minute,
that you get to a point where people are not taking you seriously unless you act. So I am acting today. I'm voting no, but I will tell you this, is if this bill fails today, I will be the first to sit down with leaders of the state chamber and start talking seriously about economic development and how it's not just for businesses, but it's also for individuals. And that we need to prioritize both. They are interconnected and interrelated, and they are not separate bills, in my opinion. Because that's the only way that we're going to get those things done. Because if this truly is a race for how many people have incentives, then in the last 15 years it has failed individual workers. Individual workers' salaries have not gone up. Quality of life has not overall increased, and we need to have supports for them if this is a true race to how many people have incentives. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Morfield. Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Senator Colderman, for bringing 720. Nebraska is fortunate, and we are fortunate to be here today to discuss our state's economic development package, an event that only happens one time every 10 years. LB 720 replaces the wildly popular Nebraska Advantage Act, an Advantage Act that was hatched in better fiscal times, an Advantage Act that was supposed to cost $25 to $60 million per year and will cost the state in excess of $200 million annually starting in 2020 until 2027. This just goes to show that the most popular kid in the room may not be the smartest. We have an opportunity before us, a chance to stop LB 720 today and take the interim to craft a true business incentive program that benefits all Nebraskans. LB 720, known as the Nebraska Imagine Act, is a scaled-down version of the current Nebraska Advantage Act. There have been 18 amendments filed to improve the Imagine Act, and today we will be doing good to hear one or two before time is up. I would offer this. Let us take the summer to listen to the entire spectrum of businesses across Nebraska to construct a fiscally sound, vibrant, and accessible program. A program that includes the requested components of workforce development, hard caps, and a shorter payout timeline. A program that allows small startups in Deschler, Friend, and Wilbur to participate. A program that stops the brain drain of losing our best and brightest from rural communities. A program that goes from chasing elephants to enabling mice. A program that builds on the strength of our women, minorities, and youth working hard to start up new businesses or expand existing ones across this great state. There is no need to rush this legislation through today. The sunset date for the Nebraska Advantage Act is December 31st, 2020. I believe that we should use the time given to us to build the best program possible. And we are not there today. I'm opposed today because we can do better, and if better shows up next January in the form of a program that Nebraskans will embrace, so will I. Colleagues, I urge you to vote red today and allow this legislation to be improved over the interim. With that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Breezy.
Thanks, Senator Brandt. Senator Breezy, 2 minutes 20.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for that, Senator Brandt. Several of us who weren't intending to do so on Wednesday changed our minds and voted to advance LB 720 with the understanding that this would be a package deal. 183 stalled, now 720 has to stall. And it's not about getting our way, it's not about spite, anger, frustration, or any of the above. We were sent here to work through our emotions. You know, we were sent here to do what's right for Nebraska. And what I'm proposing is about coming together to do what's right for Nebraska. We need a package. Midwestern economy, Nebraska's economy in particular, is driven by agriculture. As agriculture goes, so does Nebraska. But our producers have been dealing with devastating flooding, less than ideal spring weather, pathetic market prices, and pathetic margins. And in the face of that reality, our ag producers are burdened by the third highest property taxes in the country, an unreasonable reliance on property taxes that is driving ag producers out of business. You're not going to have a vibrant Nebraska economy if you don't have a vibrant ag economy. At the same time, our residential property owners have the fourth highest taxes in the country. Property taxes can comprise 30 to 40% of a house payment, can drive young couples out of the market, discourage migration to our state. Out-of-control property taxes are choking off economic growth in Nebraska. And while at least 2 legislative proposals for significant property tax relief in Nebraska stalled this year, we're talking about advancing a bill for corporate giveaways. In a state like Nebraska, that's an irresponsible reversal of priorities. It's something that I won't be part of. A rising tide lifts all boats. It must lift all boats. So if we're talking about corporate subsidies masked as incentives, we also must be addressing our property tax crisis.
That's why I've said several times in the last week, it has to be a package deal. We let 720 advance Wednesday with the understanding that 720 and 183 would be tied together. Obviously, 183 faltered. Before that, 289 faltered. It tells me.
It's time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Items to the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 436 is correctly engrossed. The Business and Labor Committee will have an executive session in noon in room 2022, Business and Labor at noon in 2022. Mr. President, Senator Kalowski would move to recess the body until 1 p.m. 1 p.m.
Motion is to recess to 1 p.m. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. We are in recess to 1 p.m.